Hey, what's up? It's John from Coding Addict, and welcome to another Web Dev Power Hour live stream / podcast, the only web dev podcast, which is still proudly sponsored by CSS Floats and good old jQuery. Thank you to our sponsors for
Yes,
sponsoring. And as
jQuery
always,
all the
uh,
way. jQuery. If you're not using jQuery right now, I don't know what you doing.
you're missing on stuff.
You're
If
missing
you,
out. You're missing
yeah,
out for sure.
yeah,
There's so many jobs.
jQuery, like
jQuery jobs.
there's not. It's not even Remix versus jQuery. It's not even
Oh yeah, yeah.
competition.
jQuery wins all the
I
time.
mean,
I mean,
it's
seriously,
it's it's not
seriously.
even.
It's
It's
not even
not worth
competition.
discussing. And as
No.
always, I'm
No.
joined by one and only Mr. Paul Brutlovsky, the developer advocate for the greatest
Greatest
CMS ever
company yeah,
created,
ever created.
Strappy CMS,
Happy
and
CMS.
the mastermind behind the greatest YouTube channel ever created.
Yeah, everything the greatest. That's basically
Coding
what you
after
gotta do.
30.
Uh, it's
Again, the Pulse channel is Coding After 30. How are you, Mr. Paul?
I'm doing great. How are you today? Uh, you
I'm
know,
a little bit hectic all over the place,
yeah.
so
You
my
look like
apologies
you're
to
missing some
everybody.
stuff in your
I'm
house.
missing stuff, I'm
It's
selling
big.
stuff, I'm watching two kids that are constantly complaining about something. So, few things like today we'll have to finish on a dot at 3, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, that's
So yeah, sorry, but yeah, today is one of those days. And yeah, doing good though. This week I worked on like kind of started working on like project for free codecamp, so that was kind of unexpected, but also
oh nice.
busy. Yeah, but I'll tell more once it's pretty much done. And I don't want to ruin the
Yeah,
surprise. And yeah,
it's
other than
jQuery.
that, really good. What's new in your world, dev world and Strappy world and everything?
Uh just enjoying Happy, the greatest CMS ever. No, but to be honest, I gotta admit, like I'm so lazy when it comes to creating backends because I know I could just use Strappy, and it's just so convenient for me because I've used it for such a long time. And so I'm learning Remix, and in Remix, it's a full stack framework by the awesome kids from React Router. But you could literally do full stack application with it, and I'm still just like, I'll just call Strappy from it, just because it makes it easier. So it's been pretty interesting that how lazy I am, and how for majority of like business needs, you could be fine with like creating something quickly with whatever framework you like, even if it's Angular, whatever, and you could throw a CMS or Strappy and whatever you like, and it's just like it's pretty quick and easy to test out ideas.
I decided how I'm going to respond to your questions about Next.js course. I'll once
About
you
to ask
ask
it.
that,
I was
once
about
you,
to ask it. When,
I'm gonna
when,
I'm
when?
gonna answer like
What's going
answer
on?
with a question when the Strappy is gonna be in cloud, because when Strappy is in cloud, then that's it. From that moment, like all my courses, I'll just bomb with the Strappy because I want to use
Man,
it.
yeah, it's gonna happen. I don't
I
know.
know, I know. I don't
I
want
don't
to
have
put
the
you on a
exact
spot though.
date, but it's in private right now, and people are testing it out, and I'm really excited when that comes out because deployment is going to be so
Yep,
simple compared to
exactly.
anything. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, it'll be awesome. But I don't think you have to wait that long. You could always add that like little video because you could still develop Strappy locally. It's the deployment part
Yep.
is going to
Yeah.
be easy.
Yes.
So don't
Yes.
wait
Yes.
for
Yes.
cloud before your next JS comes out because you know. Uh, but yeah,
Yeah. So before we switch over to the chat, just letting you know, if you prefer the podcast format, you can always find us at webdevpowerhour.com. So
www.
webdevpowerhour.com. And we have also, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just look for Web Dev Power Hour. So someone is asking right away. I can see the last comment was just about the Natasha's channel. So let me just find it right now. And then as far as the other questions, so we have some gibberish at the very beginning. Then we have Alex. Hello, Alex. Nice to see you. There's no topics, Alex.
What's
like
up?
we well, we stopped doing pretty much topics. We're just gonna free roll or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
Andrew's here. What's up,
yeah.
Andrew? Andrew's saying that he's learning Remix, but you're also learning Astro. Well, not learning, but you're also working with Astro. I saw some of your tweets. Let us know how is that working. I'm
I heard
really
a lot of
curious.
people saying good things about Astro, which is frustrating because I don't want to learn another thing, on top of the things that I'm learning, which is one of them is like I have to like finish learning TypeScript. So I'm gonna wait on Astro, but
No,
after my
that's like
after
I
my
know
remix journey.
something that we have already talked about it over here. Where that's one of the quotes that I really like from like Wes Boss and in general. The idea where he's saying, well, he usually likes to sit on his hands as far as the new stuff, and just wait for to gain popularity. So you're not
I
kind
know.
of wasting your time on that. So
That's why I'm
that's
still on jQuery.
yeah,
I
and
sit on my
CSS
hands.
floats.
It's the best with a Bootstrap. Now it's like yeah, like it feels weird saying Bootstrap now too. It's because like Tailwind's taking over. Um,
Yeah, bootstrap is not to use again the words like or basically the idea that something is dying, but yeah, I basically I think that Tailwind for sure is gaining popularity.
oh my
That's
gosh, I just discovered Daisy UI. I mean, I knew about it with Tailwind. It's
hmm.
so nice. It's so easy to like throw stuff up, and like they have easy theming, which is cool. It's really nice.
But
Um,
what like how does that work then? Because I'm not
so
familiar.
it literally uses Tailwind under the hood, and they just have their own
Oh,
styles and components. So yeah, just look up Daisy UI. It's pretty neat. Actually, you could sh- I could share a link of website that I'm working on. It's not done, but it's pretty. Actually, I don't know where I put it. Everything I moved everything everywhere. I was gonna say.
as a
Oh, I
side
was gonna
note,
say. Did you
sorry.
go ahead?
As a side note, I just dropped a link. So someone is asking for a link to Natasha's channel. It's Artsy Coder again. 533, and then I shared a link to the actual video that I was suggesting, that web developer's journey um, playlist. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, did you watch or he listened to Wes Boss Syntax episode where they talked about doing events and public speaking and kind of like their reasoning why everybody should do something like that? That's pretty interesting.
No.
Yeah, so they were just saying like how giving talks or doing stuff like in a community in public is like a really good way to build a reputation, get out there, that could be like really helpful in terms of like even your advancements or stuff like that. And the argument, they're not arguing, they were saying like you don't even have to wait to be an expert, because you could just find one thing and pick one thing and then dive deep, research it, and then prepare a little talk about it. And you could do this, by the way, on like very small scale. So like here's like one interesting thing I wanted to share. So I live in Austin, Texas, and I was telling you last time like how I've been enjoying going to local meetups. And so what's interesting, like I was talking on Twitter about, oh, I went to like a remix meetup. It was like pretty awesome. I had a lot of fun, and I can't wait to try it out. And I said how I like publicly, I on Twitter said I'm going to be building this little application, learning what remix is all about. And what's cool, without me even saying it, the organizer of the meetup reached out to me, and he's like, "Hey, we always love to hear people give little talks about what they're like learning, even if it's like beginner type of topics, because there's a wide range of people." And so I'm doing a little lightning talk next Thursday at React meetup, which is kind of cool. And I've only been doing not React remix meetup. It's React,
It
and
is.
I'm
Yeah.
kind of like excited, and I was like, wow, it's such a good way to get involved in the community and actually have a way where you could showcase to someone, hey, I did this talk, I did this, and I think it's kind of cool.
No, absolutely. That's one of those things where I strongly suggest that instead of listening to yet another kind of YouTube video how to learn web development in 3 weeks and start earning six-figure salary, which you can definitely do, but most likely not in 3 weeks. A much better use of anyone's time pretty much would be going to a local meetup, any meetup. Just find meetup, just go. I know it might be initially very intimidating, right? You go to the room with like totally strange people, and again, depends on a person. Like Paul is way better than me in that, and yet somebody is probably worse than me. But I'm also, when I go there, I'm not like, hey everybody, I'd like go in there and sit in my little corner in the beginning, and then slowly, when you start talking about the code, you kind of, you get familiar with people and everything. It's definitely, you'll meet people, then you'll get some different opinions from real, most likely real people who are in the industry and everything, and who give you way better suggestions based on the place you live, and those connections are way more important than what somebody does for, like, just because somebody makes a video just to get some clicks on it, and everything. So that's definitely my suggestion. Another interesting that I heard is that instead of just kind of, I don't know how to explain it properly, but so how everybody's saying, well, how to get your foot in the industry and everything, right? And one of those things where you don't have to wait for somebody else to make that meetup. Let's say, like you just said, you learn this one thing, right? Whether that's, let's say you'll just learn React, but then you'll learn Remix, right? You learn something on it.
Mm.
And if there are no meetups on it, make it, and then you'll meet those like
Yes.
people who come there anyway, right?
Yeah.
Regardless. So that's kind
Yeah.
of every, like, instead of maybe waiting on somebody to make a meetup about it, then make that meetup. It's like once a month thing. I know it's a little bit of hassle to decide where you're gonna host it and everything, but there's plenty of such scenarios where, for example, with Free Code Camp, they do those meetups in cafes all over the place, and that's another way how you can learn people. Again, you just need to show a little bit of initiative. It's not always going to be the case where uh, the kind of situation is going to come to you. You'll have to create it, basically. Long story short.
Yeah, you have to go. You have to go there.
So free.
I just saw this amazing comment by AirSign13. Just got React course from John based on Coding After 30's recommendation. Hoping to learn React within the month. Thanks for the content, guys. Yeah, so the course is awesome. I got a job because of taking the React course, but this was like a while ago. Like I know you updated. By the way, I was gonna say this is like really funny thing that happened to me, and again, this happened a while ago. But I remember I started taking your course, and then I like a while ago, and then I never quite finished it, and then I was like, okay, I got to finish it, and I went on, and you like updated a lot of the content, and I was like, yeah, that's good. Like I like to see that when you know instructors like keep up their courses up to date, especially when it's like something that people are looking to learn. So that was awesome experience.
That funny story I have. Since I haven't, like, so basically when React 18 came out, I mean there was like a lot of changes that are happening under the hood. So it's not like, let's say, hooks are invalid or whatever.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
use the same syntax. I literally, every project that I have switched from React 16 or 17
But it
to
still works.
18, it's just literally you change a few lines of code. Yes, of course it's faster. Yes, it's better, and blah blah blah. But the changes that are happening are under the hood, and the
Yeah.
actual new APIs, they're not that many. You're talking about few hooks here and there,
Yep.
and as far as I'm talking about some major like game changers or whatever, like the hooks were, and yet already, like, you already like see some comments are like, of course it's outdated, because it shows like that little thing, like when you don't use
Listen.
the React 18, it's just a warning like, hey, you have
Yeah, yeah,
React
yeah.
18 but you're not I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna record that part where basically nothing changes, but it's fine.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll
yeah,
do
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's funny. Like some people just like, they need to be on the greatest, the bleediest edge ever code that, just came out like tomorrow. You know what I mean? It's like they need it. They need it now. They need it now. It's like people have to run like the greatest like node version on my computer. I'm like afraid
Yes.
to switch nodes on my Mac because every time I do something breaks. I don't go like the newest thing right away because like let the other like people test it for me. Let them get it out of the way. Let them have the bugs and the issues, and then eventually you know.
No, it definitely, and this is something that I can agree with. Like, there's quite a few times where students are somewhat frustrated because this is exactly what they do in the course. I suggest installing Node. You need Node in order to run a Create React app, but Create React app does not support the Node 18 yet. It basically supports the latest, stable version, which
Yeah,
is at the moment 16. So
yeah,
of course they like go like, oh, I cannot run any of the projects. This whole thing is messed up and blah blah, blah. And then word to word, and I'm like, okay, what's your Node version? Yeah, of course
yeah.
18. So
Like
I'm like, yeah, well,
21, 21. I'm on 21 right
switch
now.
to
Like
16 and you'll be
2022.
you'll be
Yeah,
fine. So yeah,
everybody get NVM installed and just work
yes,
with the Node
yes.
version that the thing supports. Because sometimes, like, and this is another issue I run into. Like, sometimes you'll be on a Node version and the app you're using supports it, but there might be a dependency that just like that doesn't. And so like I would just say, like, don't rush. Stuff is still gonna work. Like, don't let it waste your time from learning to code or building something, because you could still use like whatever the day old Node version, like that you have. So it's perfectly fine. But to be honest, when I was first starting out, I used to think like you had to be on the greatest, like whatever, and then I
Yeah,
realized
it
like
comes with
nothing
time
works
when
when
you
you do that.
understand that
Yeah.
you can like stick with the stable versions and you'll be far better off instead of just always looking for those edge case bugs that haven't been
See, if you
solved
use
yet.
jQuery, then you don't have to worry about anything.
You're like just smooth sailing all
jQuery, yeah,
all
yes.
the way.
The funniest thing about jQuery is I remember this is a long time ago, when like I think Team Treehouse still was a thing. I don't even know if they're a thing yet anymore. And I really like hated like wanting to learn jQuery. But back then, people were like, no, you have to learn it. There's so many projects using it. And I literally like remember the week where they're like, jQuery is dead. No one's gonna use it. It's whatever. Don't learn it. And I was like, yes, like I have to learn it. And like I actually don't know any jQuery to be. That's it. I'm gonna say it in the open. Never
How
went
dare
through
you,
any of it.
Paul?
I know. I know. I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry.
I'm so disappointed. No,
Just
I
kidding. jQuary 2023
no
next year
jQuery for
is
me
gonna
was
happen.
just introduction with Bootstrap 4,
Yeah.
and then I looked at it, and then and
I like when
luckily for me, by the time I was kind of ready to start learning JavaScript, it was, I mean, ES6 was the thing, so didn't see the point.
Yeah, and didn't they remove it from Bootstrap anyway, jQuery?
Yeah, yeah, that's it. It's
Eventually, yeah, yeah,
done.
yeah,
That
yeah,
that's
yeah,
that was one of the
yeah,
major things why they were calling the end of jQuery, because it was pretty much removed from the Bootstrap
yeah.
5. And
Yeah, I hate seeing projects which have jQuery. I always like, no, forget it. I don't know.
well, yeah, but there's gonna be still like tons
Yeah,
of
there's still
them.
gonna be. Yeah, you
There's
can't like.
there's
I mean,
like
if it's for work, you do what you got to do. But it's crazy how technologies change. So, how do you decide like what thing to like focus on or learn when new stuff coming out?
It's tough. It's tough. It's like, again, I mostly procrastinate. I mostly just let it kind of um, just wait till more and more people pile on, and I also, what's more and more important for me is like, what can you do with that thing? So let's say, I know everybody's saying about Astro and whatever. Initially the thing that I heard on Syntax FM was that, as far as from the Scott Talinsky, that at that point, at that time, again, a lot of things have changed most likely, but at that point he's like, well, what can you build? Well, you can build a blog and whatever, and then you can build a portfolio and everything. And like for me, it comes down to, okay, but can you build a application with users logging in, logging out, and all that kind of stuff? So therefore, for me, the Next.js would be a preference, because like this thing of like, okay, it's faster, that's great, but if I need to have certain functionality and I cannot do that, then it's kind of okay, well, it's faster, so what? I mean, so yeah, that for me, I literally wait. I try not to jump around too much, because um I mean, if I would have more time, probably I would spend on it. But since I don't have,
Yeah.
that much time to all the time jump on every new thing, that's why I'm very cautious. Like, look what happened like with Gatsby. It was popular one day, and then the next day it's like no one's. I mean, again,
There's
not to
still
over
some people that
exaggerate.
holding on to it and like
Yeah,
until the
they are,
brain.
but
And I want to believe. I want to believe. I like, come on,
but
Gatsby, you can do it.
if
And
you
it's
take a
like,
look at the Next.js, it is easier to pretty much build an application, the same application like you would build with Gatsby, and it's way easier and much faster setup. And so when you
yeah,
start talking about like, okay, is Gatsby maybe for a millisecond faster? It wouldn't change anything for me. Okay,
yeah.
so it's a little bit faster, fine. It's and like I don't really think that when you're talking about building a product that the speed is everything. There is also how easy it is to like build things and all kinds of um, essentially reasons why you would pick one tech over another one instead of just well speed, 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 speed. For me, speed is not everything.
Yeah, Andrew Ladd gets it. He's like, I'm building SaaS using jQuery, 1000%. You know,
Okay, we have a bunch of
fastest,
questions that we need to get
greatest.
to.
Yeah.
First one, we need. There was about the remix. So it's like kind of two questions in one. So, is Remix worth learning, and is it better than Next.js? And the same person, because I believe Alex responded, and then the same person said, "Okay, but there are many tools for doing the same thing." I guess what I'm asking is that is better, and does it make my job easier?
S- So I think Remix is fairly new, and I think they do a lot of stuff interesting. And so far, my experience with it been pretty awesome. But I'm also fairly new to it. And what I would say, to this point, Next.js is definitely worth learning. And even for me, even though I'm learning a lot of Remix, like 70% of my time is spent on Next.js, and then the other 30 is on Remix. And what I'm actually doing is like I have two simple applications. One is in Next.js, one is in Remix, and I'm kind of like trying to figure out like what one does better, what one does it. But if you want to do like static site generation, you know, you have to use Next.js because Remix doesn't support that. It's just server side rendered, but
Hmm.
it does a lot of cool stuff that is like for some type of projects, the ease of like creating something makes sense to me. Like, so if I were to make like let's say a website for a coffee shop where I wanted to have the the coffee shop owner update their own content, I would literally use Remix with Tailwind and Strappy, and set it up and do like you could literally do like a coffee shop website. And again, I'm not saying something that has like it's like a business facing. People just see the menu stuff like that. It's like you could set it up on like the weekend. It's pretty cool. But Next.js is also pretty good. So I would say spend a lot of time on Next.js first because they've been around longer. Remix is still fairly new. They're still making updates and there's always changes. But it's definitely cool.
Yeah, I always approach it in the sense like literally um, which one is more used at the start. That's kind of for me. I don't tend to go into technologies that were pretty much just showed up and everything. But with that said, I also check whether it kind of the ease of learning, right? If it's let's say it is popular, but maybe it's like it's just I look at the API and it just doesn't make any sense for me unless I really have to. I'm like, okay, is there like some other approach that you can do that?
The
And
Yeah, I was just gonna say quickly, the cool thing about Remix is that they're motivating Next.js to involve, like keep evolving. So they're both kind of working together, creating cool features. And if Remix continues to grow, Next.js is gonna grow. And if Next.js continues to grow, Remix. So I know in Next.js there was no like easy way to do nested routing, like you used to be able to do in React. In Next, I think they just added the new feature. I haven't like checked it out, but in Remix, it's actually so easy to do nested routing, and it just works, and it's pretty cool. So I think like they both follow each other, like Remix and Next.js, and they both see like, okay, this is a cool feature Remix, let's put it next, and vice versa. And I think it's gonna bring both, um, frameworks to like that next level that they're even on now.
yeah, for me, it will come down to two things. If you're planning to learn as far as be better looking at better options for employment, then most likely at this point, again, we're recording this on August 19, 2022. So, yeah, please don't listen to this 5 years from now and
Yeah,
then
yeah. You said
send
jQuery.
send me a tweet that I don't know anything about, which is I don't know anything, but still, don't do that. And essentially, if that's the case, then I would still go with Next.js. If you're just looking at it, hey, look, I want to learn a framework to make my own project, then you again, we're talking about framework. So what I'm trying to say is, let's say you're not going to spend more than 1 week on Next.js just understanding the basics, how it works. Literally,
Yeah,
within whatever a few days, you'll have already some kind of running project. And the same goes for Remix. And at that point, really comes down to, well, how comfortable I'm with this technology or that
yeah,
one, and how
yeah,
comfortable, which one matches better the projects that I'm trying to make, and all that kind of stuff. But again, as far as employment, I mean, I would say Next.js simply because you can see that
yeah.
more in job
Agree.
applications, at
Yeah.
least in the area where I live. So again, that
Yeah,
that also
that's
depends.
still a thing. But I've seen like some companies using Remix and Strapi, so it's definitely picking up. Uh, Steam. I wanted to answer Alex. He says, "Haven't heard anything new about Koa from Paul. What happened?" And my response to Alex: one does not ask questions about Koa. One just does Koa. All right, Alex. That's it. That's my answer to your question. And then yeah, and then Andrew Ladd, I kind of like that. He's like, per your statement earlier about Astro, I think he's talking to somebody and he like does some name drops. Jack Harrington, Theo, coding with Jason have some nice content for it. And actually, those are a lot of other YouTubers that I also like. So I thought it's kind of cool. We have similar taste. Well, not as great as like us, of course. Number one, like I feel like every time I wake up, I wake up and I'm like, you know what? Wes Boss, like he must be so scared knowing that our
Of
podcast is literally the one underneath him. I mean, we could argue
yes.
how far down below, but we're just right behind him, and in
Yes, I
the scope
bet
of like the universe, the
him
billion
and
years, like
him and
it's just a
Scott are
second.
losing
They're
sleep
right there.
over
Yeah,
these
Scott right
these
now.
these famous live streams.
Yeah, exactly. They don't even know we exist.
Yeah, and yet in the live
It's
streams
funny.
where we always promote them. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and
it's
such
funny.
we're such competitors. But
Exactly, we are.
okay, so we have John. What's the obsession with the vegan food trucks? Simply because I heard it in different scenario. The same as taco and burrito and whatever. The same as shake and bake. The same as babili and whatever. I just go through my daily life, find something interesting, and I try to remember it when I record something. Do I always remember it? No, but vegan food truck just like I'm not personally a fan of vegans that much, meaning I just don't maybe prefer that lifestyle, let's put it this way. And so yeah, when I hear vegan food truck, that's just to me it's just hilarious. Don't ask me why. Uh
I don't eat vegan, but I've been to parties where like I'll eat something, I'll be like, "Oh, this is so good. It's so good." And then somebody will ruin my night by being like, "Did you know that was vegan?" I'm like, "No, I didn't." But I wouldn't get mad because it's vegan. I would get mad that I loved it so much. And I would be like, "My God, this is so good. Why didn't they have to tell me this?" There's like but I think like you got to eat like what you like. And I know people do things for different reasons. So for me, I love vegetables, but I can't give up meat. Like I can't do it.
yeah,
Um,
and for me it's not like I eat vegan food. It's just like vegan food truck is just I guess especially when you live in California, that's just such a to me sounds so Californian, like this concept of vegan food truck, that I just had to include it in whatever in tutorials. So there was a question about testing. No, I'm not planning to add any kind of testing content as far as the React course, even though sometimes people do complain. In my opinion, that should be a separate course, and I'm not going to
yeah,
jam pack it into the course because, as far as I can see, when it's even included in the existing course, if it's not a separate course, you're
yeah,
literally talking about
that's
some hour of content where
yeah,
it kind of
not
doesn't
enough.
make sense. So You're just it's the same as somebody just going there googling and then they get some hello world examples. To me, it's kind of waste of your time. If that's really what you need to, let's say, learn, then yes, you should invest in whatever resource to kind of look at it separately. For me, that's not that doesn't go hand in hand as far as I'm concerned. If it's a React course, it's a React course. I'm not going to talk about Next.js. I'm not going to talk about testing. That is a React course. So that's kind of my approach.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like there's definitely like resources around the topic, but for someone like trying to get their first job, like there's so many other things you should know how to do well before trying to get into testing, and you could get a job without knowing much about testing, and if anything, you'll learn it on your job. So,
Yeah,
but
that's
I
an
know people
interesting
have
thing.
different
So
opinions.
this is kind of where we get in. Like I have gotten into some hot water in a sense that like it depends on experience. Some like it depends on experiences. So one developer can say, no, I've been to like whatever interviews I've had already held already such and such jobs, and I've never been asked anything about testing. And then there's somebody else who says every interview I go to, there's a testing question, why the testing topic hasn't been covered here, and blah blah blah. It's such a disaster, and to me, it's again, it depends on if you're really getting all those testing questions, then yeah, you should invest in a
Right.
separate resource to learn it. It like in most people I communicate, don't share such experience, so that's why
What
for me it's a separate topic.
Yeah, like if you know vanilla JavaScript and you know how to target elements with JavaScript, I think testing would be not that difficult to pick up once you start looking at the documentation.
Hmm.
Coming from someone who doesn't do much testing, but just take it with a grain of salt and trust me when I tell you that. I mean, I looked at Jest, I looked at a bunch of other ones. You know, you're just writing JavaScript and that's it.
No, it's
So
just that's one of those decisions that I made that like how, and again it comes down to how I like to consume content myself. So if the course is about one thing, then it's about one thing only. The same as how I have no plans to add Sass, for example, in my HTML and CSS. That to me is a separate content, and I mean I'll die on that hill. That's just my opinion. The same as I'm not gonna talk about in JavaScript course about React or about node or what. No, it's look, it's a separate topic. That's what I want to convey, the projects that I want to make, and that's it. And that's kind of, I know some people disagree with that. That's fine with me. Then but I'm have no plans to change my mind. Then we had a React developer interview. Process was going well until they sent me a coding assessment in jQuery and C sharp. I asked if it was the correct assessment, and they wanted to know why. I don't know what
So
else to
I would take
respond.
a guess. Like I feel like they want someone who could do more than just the front end. So I had a similar situation on a job, and to tell you, it basically have a project whose backend is powered by ASP.NET and C Sharp, and using the old version of Bootstrap that still uses jQuery. And so they want a React developer who probably also would feel comfortable helping out on the API and the back end of things. And I literally had the same situation. My first job, I got hired as a React developer. Luckily, they didn't give me an assessment in C sharp because I didn't know it at the time. But they said, listen, if you're going to hire you, you have to start learning C sharp and ASP.NET so you could help out. So if you were at that interview and you like, and they asked you that question, I don't know if you could still reach out to them, but be like, hey, like I'm applying as a React developer. And to be honest, my C sharp skills are non-existent, or like I'm not too familiar with it. But you could say like I'm willing to learn and understand why you do that. So you could probably start a conversation around it. But I think like in terms of when you apply to a job, and I just want to touch how you said, is this the right assessment? I think if you apply for one thing, but they expect you to do another, you definitely want to bring it up because you don't want to like get hired and then they're like, oh, you need to code everything in C sharp. And you're like, wait, that's not the thing that I know. And so it's important to kind of like make sure you understand what the requirements are.
Yeah, for me it was something similar where not it wasn't with the C sharp and jQuery, but I applied to one of the agencies and they sent me like at that point I pretty specifically said that I only use Figma, but they sent me a bunch of Photoshop files, and I was like, well, I guess it's not gonna
What are you
happen.
doing? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like, I'm
Funny.
not gonna pick up a Photoshop for
I
whatever.
think they asked that on purpose. Like, what do you use? Figma. Okay, we'll give you Photoshop. And if someone be like, I use
Yes,
Photoshop, they'll send you Figma. You
Figma
know, they do
files.
that on
Yeah,
purpose, to, like mess with you.
yeah.
Interesting thing because we last stream we talked about everybody should learn TypeScript, and then I just recently heard there are some companies publicly deciding not to use TypeScript, and some people doing it in private where they're like it's just too much overhead, and it's kind of interesting.
Can you
Um,
name the companies, or it's kind of
I heard in a
secret?
passing conversation, but I
Okay,
just wanted
okay,
to bring
okay.
it up here to do
Yeah.
so you could all look into it and kind of. But
Well,
that's
that's really
interesting.
interesting. Well,
Yeah,
I'm really curious then how this is going to play out because again, what we discussed before, it's funny how some companies are like 100% on betting on TypeScript, and I'm talking about 100% where the doc's already in TypeScript and the implementation is already set up in TypeScript, and some are saying no, this is not like yeah, that's I'm very curious how that's gonna work out.
and
Uh,
then I was really upset because I think uh, GitHub is deprecating some of their GraphQL packages because it's not a school anymore. I guess I also heard this in passing, but it's
who? Sorry,
kind of
sorry, you were interrupting. Who's deprecating what?
so GitHub
Mm-hmm.
is deprecating GraphQL in their API, I believe. So because they initially had an API in GraphQL, which is
Uh-huh.
kind of interesting, and so like it seems there's a trend also that like GraphQL still has a lot of use cases, but REST still is like the most popular thing, which is kind of like interesting because there was the time where I went on this whole like GraphQL bandwagon. I still like GraphQL, but then like you know if I stuck with the rest, that would have been fine. It's the old school thing still good, and it still keeps getting better. You know.
Okay, so I have a long one kind of. So it's three questions pretty much in one. Hey John, I love your courses. I tried to learn React with your course, but I didn't have nearly the JS foundation I needed. So I did your JS course, and it revolutionized my learning. Then let me skip to the next one. Now I'm picking up React so much easier than before using your course. Question: I'm finished with all React tutorial theory, but not the project. Would you recommend completely finishing all the projects before moving on to Node.js course? Yes. I'm working towards getting to Marin course. Yes, I would definitely suggest that because working on a project again, trying to repeat them, pretty much see what we do in a project and then try to repeat that. It's essentially like those projects are just showing different features of
Yep.
what you can do with React, and then you can take one of those features in one of that project and put it in your project. So I definitely 100% suggest finishing all the projects. Again, when we talk about all of the projects, you can do just of those 15 basic ones first, and then you can right away jump to the big ones, the GitHub search and e-commerce, and now there's the Redux toolkit. But I would strongly suggest before you're picking up Node, simply because like this is something we have discussed with Paul like a lot of times here, where it's better if you're like good at something. So if
Yeah.
get good at front end first, and then you can kind of switch to Node.js.
And so I want to say a few things like on this thing. You said there was many questions. There's only one question. Like the first three parts were just compliments. They're just compliments with
I,
one question. All right.
I,
Okay, I get that. So okay, let's get that straight. Another thing I want to say, that's actually one of the reasons I like John's courses a lot, because if you look at like your JavaScript, it's got like so much content and it's so much practice projects. And I think it's the practice that makes better. And I like and hate about John's courses is like how many times you have to do like these project based things, because it's like it's a lot. But at the end of the day, like you remember things better because you put it into practice. And like you said, you have different concepts covered by different projects. And that's one of the reasons why like I always recommend your courses, because to me it's that practice part, putting in the reps, putting the repetition, that's important. And I think it's like if you take a course and you don't complete all the projects, you're definitely doing yourself a disservice, you know.
I mean, it's just it is. I know it's frustrating when you're looking at these 40-hour, 50-hour, whatever courses, But at the same time, you need to think about it that it's not like you'll still have to spend that time. Yes, I know it's very kind of tempting to be like, okay, I'm just gonna learn 10 hours and then I'm just gonna magically know everything and blah blah blah. The thing is, you'll still have to spend those whatever hours on researching stuff and kind of getting that data and info and whatever. The difference is that you already have that content there, so you can just consume it, and then you can decide what you want to build on it. It's not because I just had nothing to do or whatever. You'll simply, again, you'll still have to spend that time on it to get kind of that info, regardless, in my opinion. So, yeah, I know it's frustrating. Trust me. Like sometimes when I look at some content, I'm like, oh, how long does that take to
Yeah,
consume
yeah.
that? But
It's funny whenever I look to get courses, and I don't know what it is, but I'm like, how many hours is this? 10 hours? Keep scrolling. How many hours is this? 20 hours? Keep scrolling. 60 hours. Okay. Okay. This is a good course. I'm going to take this one. But it has to be like good stuff. So your course is good stuff, but I took a course. It was like 45 hours and it was literally filler words for like 30, like half of it. And so you got to be careful. But I know with your courses, they're always great, always good stuff. And I revisit them even to this day. Um,
no, but it's also like yourself. I mean, even okay, let's say learning something new, right? So let's take example remix, whatever. So if you're learning a course, I mean, realistically, what course that would be between, I would say, 5 hours to 10. Or 10 maybe is pushing it if you start actually building the projects. I'm just talking about, let's say, going through the docs, right? But I mean, it's still there. It's highly unrealistic that you'll pick it up in half an hour. I mean, it's just I don't think that's going to be the case. So imagine how much bigger is learning JavaScript than just a framework, which is based on React already. So yeah, just hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so Justin, just to basically, so we have one more meaning. We have another question. It's surprising to know that most companies still require a deep knowledge of class components in React developer roles. That depends actually on area. Not to, as far as, again, it depends on where you live. Like this is the feedback that I'm getting. There's people say that everything is in hooks, and yes, there is areas where everything is still like not, I wouldn't say largely, but class based, which is actually quite strange to me because if if I would have to write the class based component, I would struggle to say the least. I literally like I'm like I need like if I read the code, I understand what's happening. Let's say if I have some documentation with example of class based,
yeah.
but if I need to write it myself, I mean, yes, I use the extension where I can set it up, but like for me, it's like that would be pretty big mental challenge.
I mean, for React, I really don't see any reason using class components. Like, I'd love to. Like, I'm sure there's like one use case or whatever, but for majority of stuff, it's so much easier doing like with hooks. Another thing I was gonna say, it's like JavaScript doesn't like have real classes like they would like in some of those other languages. So it's just like syntactic like sugar. Anyway, but it's nice syntactic sugar. I remember trying to like first I learned about classes and then I was like, okay, let me write it with functions. And it's a pain in the butt. So classes do like, make things easier to write and look at it visually. But in terms of React, like I don't think like it makes sense. Although you use classes in your Node application or
I used
for
for the error, yeah. Like, and
yeah.
look, this is for me. I'm
How did
not.
I know that I took that course? I'm just saying. I don't just blindly tell you about John's courses for no reason. I'm just telling you because I took them. And if they sucked, I would have told you. I probably wouldn't be on this podcast, but whatever. You know?
Yes, so right away click mute the moment the moment
Yeah,
Paul is gonna start saying the truth. I'll just quick mute, yeah, and yeah, no one can hear you, Paul. He's saying that life is awesome. And no, there are some situations where actually class does make sense for me, but again, it really depends on the scenario. And I don't think that that would be a front end as far as React. I do want to bring up one interesting point though, and it's actually it was I don't want to throw Paul in hot water here, but there
Fine.
is this kind of movement from even like quite established developers who come. Okay, I don't want to maybe use the word complain, but they point out that basically class-based approach, the mental model, for them made more sense when we're talking about, you remember how it used to be component mount
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
will
yeah, yeah.
mount and whatever. And that is interesting for me, where they say like, look, the hooks are, they just add too much
I think
complexity and
they're just
whatever. So
don't know what they're talking about. No, no, but
and
just I'm
that's what
kidding.
Paul
I'm kidding.
responded on
I'm kidding.
Twitter.
That was like my no. What I'm gonna say is this. So when it comes to JavaScript, my mind just likes the functional like paradigm, and I don't like using classes like in JavaScript, and I hate using classes like um and specifically in React, Next.js, whatever. I will always work with hooks, but I also do for fun like C sharp programming. Like I used to do ASP.NET. I don't do it anymore, but for fun, like I'll play around with Unity. And to me, like making classes makes sense. So when I'm using something like C sharp and how like the type of stuff that people build with it, it relies on classes. And so to me, it makes sense there. But when it comes to JavaScript and React, like I just don't see myself using it, which is kind of weird because you would think I would like classes on both sides, but I don't, which is crazy.
Andrew has a very interesting, so he has longer question. Do you guys have a take on using context API versus something like Zustand? I know that when you trigger a component using context, the entire application is also affected versus when you trigger, let me get it on the screen. Okay, let me see. When you trigger a component using Zustand, only that component is affected. Is there a point where using Zustand would provide true performance benefit? I'm not familiar with Zustand, but I assume that that's definitely the case. Where as a state library, they handle those changes more fine grained than a context. That's true. Yes. Like let's say if you like set up a big context, and every time you'll update, then there's going to be that re-render, which pretty much triggers down the line. For me, the answer again comes down to a couple of points. First, is it your project or is it the company project? If it's a company project, most I don't see, like again in very specific scenarios. Like I believe the last company you worked for, Paul, you used context, didn't you?
Yep.
It
Context. We
depends on.
actually was the interesting. We started with Redux, but then we realized that it was an overkill, so we uh, factored out Redux and just used context for our case,
So
and it
that's
was
one scenario,
fine.
and yet you can have a scenario where you for sure
Yeah,
will use one of the state libraries because they offer a more structure for, let's say, as you're working, when you're working as a team. Now, as
yeah,
far as the personal project, that really depends on the size of the application. Simply for re-render, I would not switch from one to another one. But
yeah,
with that said, I'm a huge fan right now of Redux Toolkit. And I'm simply saying this because there is a point where once your application grows bigger to, not to be redundant, but to-do list, then there are like lots of like smooth patterns that just are already provided for you. And I definitely think that's the case with Zustand. Even though I'm not familiar with it, I can
yeah.
guarantee you that it's going to be just easier, like mentally and developer wise, if your application is already beyond the point of just sticking everything in one
Yeah.
context.
So
So
like one
go.
thing that I heard, and I have like a bunch of friends who are developers, and they're in different various positions. Some are really really high, and one thing they say to me, don't try to optimize your app if it's not an issue. Like unless you have like an issue or performance thing that you could point clearly, like, hey, because of this we lose this much amount of money, or our customers complaining. Because going down that optimizing path, it just will create like more issues. And the second thing I would say, like if you don't know the solution, and I'm not familiar with Zustand, but I'm like Zustand, but I'm gonna uh, use Redux, let's say, as an example, is if you're not sure what problem it solves, then you probably don't need to use it. So I'm sure like it's having the cases where it makes sense. And like another good example is like, things like TRPC. Like, it's like you have to understand why it is created and what problem that it solves. And once you know that, then you would make a decision if you should use it or not. But if I'm just saying, oh, TRPC because I heard like Theo mentioning it, or like, Zustand because I heard like Andrew mentioning it, or like everybody should use GraphQL because somebody else said it, don't use stuff because you hear buzzwords, but understand the problem they're solving and know that that's the problem that you need to solve in your application before deciding on what you're going to use. Because it's very easy to get caught up in trying to learn things just because somebody else said it. But if you don't know the reason why, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. But yeah, that's kind of like where I stand on this.
No, that's definitely the case where you need to. It it makes way more sense to deal with that issue when it actually when you need to face it. Hopefully, this makes sense. It's just gonna be it's gonna be far easier to, let's say, implement those changes because there's a necessity instead of just, hey, this is supposed to be the new thing or whatever. And again, re-render wouldn't like is not going to kind of for unless, again, like you said, there's a clear performance like issue, and that's why you need to fix it and everything. With that said, again, the moment I tried the Redux toolkit, I want to do it on every to do application
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
much.
yeah. No,
But literally, when it comes to the bigger application,
so
it actually
I was
goes.
gonna
Yeah, sorry.
go ahead, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. I was gonna
No,
tell
no,
you like
there
what
is
I've
a
been
there's a
driving
question
on doing.
from Benjamin to kind of this also
Yeah,
is on this topic, where one thing you can do regarding performance is to write multiple contexts so every component isn't affected. Yes, Benjamin, that's absolutely correct. However, I do find the communication, if there needs to be one, between those contexts somewhat clunky. I do. Again, it's not a kind of diss on that, but you can do it for sure, yes, and that's a very good approach where you, instead of putting everything in one context, you set up multiple. But I find it way easier when you have in Redux Toolkit, you have slices, which is pretty much the same idea. You just, take some functionality and you put it in a separate kind of file. I find when you need to communicate with this most basic example, when you have, let's say, a user, he or she logs in, and then you need to attach that token to, let's say, when it goes to some kind of authorized, data that you need to create, update, or whatever, right? It's way easier with the Redux Toolkit.
it's funny because with Remix, my goal is to try not to use state at all. Your database becomes your state. So like you might need in a component, maybe you have a drop down or a toggle, but in terms of like getting data from the form and like the way Remix handles that, you literally write less state in general, which is kind of cool. So there's that paradigm shift, depending what you're working on. Um, yeah. So
Yeah, so we have documentation for Redux Toolkit is awesome. Yep, I can't argue with clunkiness label. Yeah, again, it's not it's I wouldn't say that it's like very horrible, but it's just there's easier approaches. That's all I'm trying to say. What else? What else we have? Uh, I got the React developer assessment task, and the instructions says that the use of functional components is highly uh, prohibited. Yeah, that's weird. That's really weird. I mean, that then in
yeah,
that
that
case,
is
yeah, for
weird.
sure, you kind of need to pick up the class based, I guess.
Yeah, like I mean, they. I'm assuming it's because they have an application that like predominantly uses classes. You know,
Should I
but
learn the class based components to understand old code, or is understanding the functional components enough? I I would just go with functional first, and then just kind of look through. I wouldn't spend too much time on class based components, in a sense that I would just first understand the functional, how everything works, and then just spend, I don't know, 1 hour, 2 hours on going through the documentation to understand how the class stuff works. And then I think that should be good enough for in the future when you need to do that.
I think, yeah, I think the like definitely be familiar, but spend like John said, a lot of stuff like I'm on functional components and using hooks. But here's like a cool thing. Like I used to work at a company where they had a lot of old code which relied on class components. And whenever I had to work somewhere, I would take the class component and I would refactor it to use functions instead, because I hated just working with this and the bindings. It was just so confusing and it just slowed me down. And I felt like it's an unnecessary like mental load to think about all the time. And you don't have that problem that much when you're using functional.
We actually have to call it a day simply because my oldest woke up
The
and
boss,
she,
the
she's gonna
boss,
she's
the
gonna
boss
do a
is gonna
lot of
come up, honestly.
she's gonna do a lot of complaining,
Do
most
like a
likely in a
flying kick
second.
into the room. Ah!
It was awesome to see everybody. It was awesome to
Yeah, it's always
see
fun.
Paul and everybody else, and it was awesome to chat. Yeah, that's pretty much about it for me. Do you have any
No,
parting
thank you,
words?
John. Thank you, everybody. Jake Warrior all the way. We're still the number one
CSS
podcast,
floats.
even though Wes Boss and Scott don't agree with us.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna like start this conversation like we are a big rivalry, even though they don't even know we're not even a blip on their radar. But maybe if we keep
But
this joke long enough,
yeah,
they're like,
sure,
who are
sure.
these jerks who just keep talking trash
Gorgeous.
about us? By the way, we love Wes and Scott, so they're amazing. If you
Yep.
don't watch
It's
Syntax podcast, go check it out. But thank you,
yep.
John. Thank you, everybody,
Thank
and I'll
you,
see everybody later.
and see you next week. Bye bye.